All right, welcome to episode 2 of chapter 1, and let me just get right down to it. All right, so we talked before about what can you sacrifice, right? But maybe that's just not the best approach for us, and oftentimes it's not the best approach for us, right? So let's talk about downshifting, right? Instead of what can we sacrifice, maybe it's, right? I mean, because downshifting is an idea here that there's a danger in focusing on what we can't do rather than what we can, right? Buy less, give up your car, stop shopping. I mean, we mentioned before, first of all, there's a whole lot of people that just don't have stuff to give up. Certainly behaviors, but they're not accounting for a majority of what, maybe that's emissions or energy usage or whatever that might be. And of course, most people, and I can only speak for this culture, but most people are really only willing to sacrifice just so much. So really what we need, instead of buying less or stop shopping altogether, telling people give up their car, which isn't an option for many people, we've got to have greener choices to choose from, right? And those choices require that we engage in collective action so that those choices are available to us, right? All right. So we mentioned this before, but obviously there's a lot of environmental problems that challenge us. And experts, they know what's wrong. They can tell us what's wrong, and we can make a list, right, on a board. And if that board went around our classroom, we could go around and around and around. But oftentimes the same folks can't tell us necessarily why we got into this mess or how we might be able to get ourselves out. Okay, so that's why we're focusing on social science and the social sciences, because that gives us already a working knowledge of like political, cultural, economic, social variables, right? And so then those of us that are social scientists can focus, a great deal of our attention on both of those two things, right? The how and the why, not just like hate this or that's all wrong and messed up, but really, yeah, but like why did we get here and how do we fix it? Okay. And I know fixing it can be vague, but we also know across the board all sorts of mechanisms right now by which we could start to fix and at least make inroads on these problems. All right. So this is some basic Soc from Soc 100, but I think it's important for us to understand this semester, and that's the sociological imagination. We are trying to cultivate that. If you've not had a Soc 100 class, that's fine, but then this is extra for you, right? I mean, the sociological imagination is this idea that we train ourselves to be able to see the relationship between the individual and the larger society. Maybe that's like how personal problems are transformed into public issues. Maybe that's the individual in a relationship, and then the larger thing, which would be like divorce rates in society. Okay. So the ability, again, to grasp that individual life and then those larger forces that shape our lives. And then we can start to really engage with looking at all those variables that I just talked about. So many of our problems or successes as well, they're not necessarily unique to us, but they're the result of these much larger social trends. So once we understand how to connect it, and then we can use that sociological imagination, the ability to see that connection, then we can understand society and how it affects other people's lives, how it affects our lives. And then we can look at variables like power and the individual. And then how does that impact how people live, thrive, survive, whether they have a share of the environmental goods more or the environmental bads. And we'll talk about that. All right, so social constructivism, good term for the test, but an approach that focuses entirely on the sociological dependent knowledge of a phenomenon rather than on any inherent qualities, the things it possesses itself. So let's strip that down. I really don't think that my job as a college professor is to take hard concepts and make them even harder for you to understand. I think it's to take challenging concepts and make them easier for us to understand. So there's a need to focus on the tangible, right? And a need for collaboration in order to gain a more complete picture of life, right? Not necessarily just on this inherent qualities of something, but what's that mean? What is tangible? How do people collaborate? And then what's that have to do with our natural world? Once we get that more complete picture, right? So we're looking this entire semester at how our social and natural worlds intersect, right? What does sociology have to do with the environment? And I really have here our social worlds, our natural world, even on campus. I mean, they're going to build a new building. And last year there were these two amazing over 100-year-old pine trees. and they cut them and a bunch of other trees down right as you kind of turn across from the stadium, and there's nothing there. They didn't replace them with anything, and there's not going to be any building there. There's no new sidewalk there. So it's like, that's a choice. Do you work around that tree or do you pave over it? That's one intersection, right? Out of an infinite amount of intersections as far as where social people, where humans and our natural world intersects, because there's almost no place now in the globe where we haven't intersected. Maybe in the deep, deep, deep depths of the ocean where we're unable to go. But for the most part, you know, we have been all over this globe. So where does that social world and that natural world cross them? All right, describe our environment in one word. And I understand that usually that is a culmination of things. So we'll get to that when we have a class meeting. All right. So just so that you're not left asking, what does sociology have to do with the environment? More than you think, maybe? Absolutely. By the time we're done this semester, or already, you know that how we behave, our behavior as human beings, has everything to do with our environment, right? So yes, everything. And maybe there's not one environmental problem, like I said, that doesn't touch human society, no matter how remote, how impoverished. And I think this leak over here of sewage is in a very affluent neighborhood. So although people with more money, power, and access can resist the impacts of climate change more, that doesn't mean that this isn't their air that they're breathing too, or their water that they're sharing, or whatever that might be. So we really can't avoid the externalities of climate change at this point, whether you're poor and have been dealing with it forever, or whether you're very wealthy and well-to-do and live high up on the mountain, you still are going to have to deal with that. So all environmental controversies are a result of social action, okay? So basically, human beings behaved in a certain way, and now we have these controversies and these things that are going on and challenges and problems, and none can be resolved without us. And if we're really that far into it, and we are the ones on this planet that are sort of running the show, it can't be resolved without social action, without collective action, and without people being able to agree on what action to take. So whether you like it or not, human beings are involved. So there's WWJD, WWJDD, what would Jason Downing do? And then there's WWHD, what will humans do? And that's you and that's me, because like I've said before, we already know the Earth will be just fine. Even if we wreck it, it will rebirth, unless, you know, a giant comet hits it and just the whole thing. Otherwise, it will do its thing. So I don't necessarily think that we have to have some type of dark dystopian future where it's, I don't know, apparently like nuclear pigs running around in filth, or a beautiful green world. I don't think that we always have to be so polarized. I know we don't, into these extremes. Everybody on the face of this planet, no matter where your life, your social, your political, your economic commitment lies, we need this Earth to survive. There's no arguing that. All right. So already hit the sociological imagination, but now we kind of understand, once we grasp that, this operational space when we look at the social sciences, okay? So we have our social world and we have our material world, and there's this operational space, which is what we're talking about in this entire textbook. Again, the author of this textbook is Michael Carolyn. He's our dean here, Social Behavioral Sciences. Reach out to him. He's an amazing guy. If we want to understand environmental problems with a hope of devising practical solutions, because there's no real reason for us to be in this class and just try and understand environmental problems and then be like, isn't that interesting, right? It's with the hope of devising some practical solutions. And again, those solutions go beyond political affiliation or economic affiliation or social affiliation, because this is the planet that sustains our life. So we have to understand how these two realms, right, interact with each other. And also, we really have to understand how our material world shapes us, because our material world has a huge impact on how we interact with it, on our social world, and then, of course, on our natural world. Oh, he thought he was going to be awesome and showing off, and inertia, you lose. But inertia is a real thing, right? I mean, if we're going to change what's going on with environmental concerns and problems, inertia is the base, and here's the basic, I know, but that's just, you have to have something of equal or greater force acting on something that's already got all of that inertia if you're going to stop it, if you're going to slow it down, if you're going to change it, okay? And that is the same thing with technological momentum and sociological momentum, right? I mean, things and people and the way we act, it gathers momentum as time and context changes, right? And all these social structures that we deal with, political, legal, technological, educational, economic, social, whatever, right? There's a ton. We really have the greatest impact or control over some of that, especially technology, when it's just introduced, because then it's like, where are we going to go with this? But as tech intertwines with us, right? And it becomes more difficult then to be able to say, nope, right? This thing's a pain in my butt. Don't need it anymore. Pretty sure, no, I need it, right? As it gets that intertwined with us and how we live and just our lives, it becomes more difficult to change those paths. So look, do it right now. Get on Google, pause this, and search up fuel, okay? And what you're going to come up with is pages and pages and pages of images of gas, gasoline, gas pumps, cars, gas cans, you name it, gas, gas. And maybe you're going to see like a windmill and then more gas. I mean, the idea of that is if we just think something like fuel is gas and that's all we got, then that's pretty much the direction of that momentum. I mean, if you really want to have cleaner energies or to forget being reliant on things like oil, because they're going to run out. And look, the sun is not going to run out. Solar power is imperfect, but that's when we need to worry, okay? When the sun is gone, the rest of this is over with too. But until then, solar power is like amazing source of energy. You could use electricity through solar power, amazing. But the point is, if we only see things like fuel as gas or successful people as males, or right, there's so many ways that we could look at sociological momentum. And a great way to do that is to look at search engines. I do that with my Social 100 class. If you search up schoolboy and schoolgirl, oftentimes those are two very different images, just like with fuel, where we kind of get a notion or an idea of something like that. So name a piece of tech that has a great deal of momentum. And what the hell is this? I don't know. It looks weird. It looks, wait, Bill and Ted? Maybe that's a Bill and Ted thing. And Bill and Ted is like back now, right? Obviously, that's a phone booth. Here are some amazing phones. Look at that guy. He's like right there in 1983 or 1985, feeling like he's on top of the technological world. Oh, that does not look like a cell phone I would use. And if you have not used rotary dial phone, you've probably seen things on YouTube about people trying to figure out your rotary phones that aren't used to it. That was a serious deal. If you got to a 9 and then an 8 and a 7 and messed up, you had to do all of those again. So anybody with 9s and 8s and 7s in their number, you had to concentrate on. It's so different today than just being like, call the Thai restaurant and get me some amazing food. All right, do you own a cell phone? Most people do these days. I'm kind of going to go over this quickly. But really the idea here is technology gathers momentum and then it becomes difficult to separate ourselves from it. Describe your phone in one word. All right. I would rather go a month without contact with my cell phone or a month without contact with nature. When students answer this in the past, it's almost all overwhelmingly, I'd rather go without my phone. But I can't, or society requires that I have it on me. So, of course, I wouldn't want to go without nature, but I really can't do without this piece of technology that has so much momentum now, right? All right. What percentage of your trips are made by bike? Obviously, in years past, CSU bike racks have been just like if you just want to see some of the most amazing bicycles in your life, that's it. And we live in Fort Collins, Colorado, where they have bike lanes and they have entire parties set up for thousands of people revolving around bikes and beer. And if you were to say, what's maybe the biggest characteristic of Fort Collins, you might say CSU bikes and beer. I don't know. Or probably just bikes. Who knows? In the Netherlands, 27% of those trips, however, are made by bike. And in our country, only 1%. Now, obviously, there are a whole lot of differences between the countries, size being a major one. However, I would say that when I go back to my hometown of Freeport, Illinois, there's not even bike lanes. And in the summertime, when I'm there for a few days, I don't even see kids riding bikes hardly at all anymore. I mean, when I was a kid, everybody was on their bike. And in Fort Collins, everybody's on their bikes. When I go back to the Midwest, No. Why not? And one of the reasons, not just geography, because obviously that's maybe the biggest piece, but another biggest piece is, what incentivizing have you done? What have you done to get people on their bikes, to make people save money, to make them feel safe, to build bike lanes and incentivize bike riding? Cut greenhouse gases, cut emissions, lower VOCs, volatile organic compounds, save a ton of money. But again, I think we take that for granted here in Colorado, where in my hometown, like I said, in Freeport, Illinois, you need to do something to get people to ride bikes. Oh, that is me in a moment of weakness, friends. Oh, the In-N-Out burger. Tasty burger. I think those fries were horrible. And that's like at 3 a.m. when there's like 200 bets out in LA. There's like 250 people hanging outside or hanging inside the In-N-Out burger. I guess we're getting one here in Colorado. Maybe we already do. Great burger, horrible fries. That's just my rundown for you. But sociologists are going to look at how we organize our social life. I mean, let's look at transportation in Japan and U.S. public transportation, or public transportation, I guess, in Europe. And what does transportation in the United States look like versus those, right? And oftentimes we think it's just a choice, but really we have stacked the deck in favor of a choice to drive a car. So it's not always just that we have a choice to drive or not. Look, we've made it easy to drive cars on purpose, right? Building highways, trillions are spent on this model, budgeting for parking lots, spaces to park cars, taxes, roads, bridges, infrastructure, fast food that you drive through liquor stores, where in my hometown, people actually walk through them. I guess that's safer. Urban sprawl, right? How you just need a car to survive now that cities have gotten so big. And obviously, to a great deal, ownership is a necessity. And when you don't have it, it can be a major barrier for you to whatever that might be, earn, get to a job, advance in some ways. So we have connected it. So although it's like that level of organization and then it's got momentum and it looks good, I mean, we've got to find a way, right, to get public transportation back, to get people walking, to get biking, to get, a light rail going straight down the middle of your state where that's most of your cities are built is a no-brainer for Colorado. Different for other states maybe, but not for us. But of course, institutions will make public transportation less convenient. They'll cut back on bus lines, make it not as safe or as clean, and they purposefully make it less attractive so that you're like, no, I don't want to take the bus. I must need a car. But that's really just about how we organize our social lives and make one thing look really fabulous and sexy and amazing and make something else look like you'd never want to do that, even if it's a great deal better for the environment. So the automobile has a great deal of momentum, and it can be replaced. It's just like phone. That's another piece of tech, right? But huge change has huge costs. So are we willing to pay them? And then the other question that I've raised before is, should we all pay them equally? I mean, some of us don't have a fleet of buses that our entire business revolves around, and we don't pollute that much. So should we have to pay equally? Charles Barkley. That's terrible. That's terrible. So how we act alongside of how we feel. What is the cost of positive environmental action? The textbook has a piece about recycling in Iowa versus Fort Collins. I think out west, that kind of stuff has been here for much longer. Sustainability, using your own bags, the environment, versus where I'm from, the Midwest, and it's taken a while. But then we could look at Australia and the United States, right? Where for decades there, recycling has been the bigger bin instead of garbage being the bigger bin is sort of an analogy. So we got to look at cost, and we have to look at benefits, and we also have to look at context. And if we're going to change these things, we've got to make structural changes, because you've got to change people's behaviors. I mean, the right attitude, we all want to have the right attitude about the environment. Even people that don't care and never done anything positive for the environment, they want to. But if there's no cost-effective way to do it, then they won't act on those beliefs. Again, every economic model we can run where we don't wait until disaster strikes and we do it first is going to save us trillions, which is economically conservative and responsible at the same time. And I think something that everybody can get on. And it doesn't have to be a party line thing or a money thing. Because if we're really just going to extrapolate whether we have enough money to save the planet or not, that's an easy question. You do. Because if you don't, then you're done. So where is, like, for me, that's There's no politics involved in that. Do you need clean air and particularly clean water to survive more than a handful of days? Yeah. So let's do it, right? Organizational change is a huge part. We got to incentivize those behaviors that lessen our ecological footprint and de-incentivize those that don't. Instead of putting your money where your mouth is, all semester long, this is how we need to think of it. And then beyond this class, you got to put your money where your behavior lies. So what behaviors can we incentivize in order to create positive ecological change? How do we get people on public transportation? How do we make it clean? How do we get people to recycle more? How do we get people just not to buy new in the first place and realize how do we really approach sustainability? Okay. So this is the biggest thing here. Environmental sociology, it's the study of community in the largest possible sense. Look, we got to understand the origins of and propose solutions to social and biophysical conflicts because that's where they're interlapping. That's where they're intersecting, like I said. And this semester and beyond, we need to be focused on solution-based thinking. A lot of what I see out there today is just fear, fear, fear. And it's not today. It was 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago. But look, we need to protect the environment and we need to understand how that works and how we can make those social and organizational changes. And we can only do that if we think with solution-based thinking. And I'm not making a plea. We have to save the environment. If you want to live, if you want to do stuff in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years, you're going to need to do these things. I mean, you can only sit in a fishing boat for so long at 110 degrees before you're not going to be able to go fishing any longer. That's just how the science of biodiversity works, and we'll look at that this semester. So we look at how consumption, the economy, technology, development, population, and the health of our bodies shape environmental conditions. And we have to get past this myth of infinite economic growth. Look, the economy, according to a lot of economists, people who do this for a living, not me, stopped growing decades ago. But it's how we measure it. So we don't have infinite economic growth, and we don't have any more space. There's no infinite amount of space. Right now, we have as much Earth as possible. What do I mean about that economy piece? Look, I mean, if cigarettes sell $2 billion worth and they cost per year, and it's more, whatever, I'm just using that as an example, and they cost our healthcare system $1 billion, then really your profit and your growth is only, minus what you put into it, is only about $1 billion. But we're just measuring things in terms of just what we sell and what does that look like, because we create this myth of a nonstop powerhouse economy. And if we're really going to talk about, and we're not, the stock market and the illusion of wealth and what people really have, all we need to look at is the last several months when one big thing happens and the economy takes a dip. Okay, a very serious one that we're going to have to look at and do something about. And at the same time, we have to understand that the small break during COVID that we've gotten, although that is the least amount of emissions we've looked at in decades and decades and decades, 6 months or a year is not going to reverse what we've been doing for decades and decades and decades. We cannot afford to lax, which is what this administration is doing. We cannot afford to lax our environmental laws and rules and just chop them down because of some global pandemic. This is actually the time to engage more than ever in protecting those. So we also have to look at ourselves. How does your consumption shape our environment? We're also going to look at how ideology, moral values, risk, and what social experiences have you had in your life influence the way we talk and act towards the environment, right? So what were you taught to value about our natural world when you were growing up, and how does it influence your behavior today? I mean, did your parents have a garden? Did they make you do that? Did they go camping all the time? Did they not? Did somebody in your family just throw garbage out the window? And so that kind of became the thing. I mean, it can be positive, that social experience, or it can be negative, or anywhere in between when we're talking about how it influences who you are today. So how can we bring about a more ecological society taking various paradigms into account? We've already looked at that, and paradigms would be lenses or frameworks that we use in sociology through which we can apply to that, or a certain problem or condition or challenge or whatever it is, solution. And of course, the interconnectedness of all things, and not, bro, we're interconnected. And I know I do that a lot. It's bruh, B-R-U-H. But I think when we think of interconnectedness, we think of hippie, and then we think of tree hugging, and then the people shut off. We're interconnected. Greeley's air and water is our air and water. The radiation from Fukushima in the world's oceans is our radiation. I just mean we are interconnected in biophysical, scientific ways, putting no value judgment on it whatsoever, or moral judgment. So local is really, really, really important. Our connection between local and global is something that sociologists look at, as well as the power of metaphor of community, that like global community. What's that really mean? Who's participating? Who's not? For understanding these social and ecological dynamics, okay? Environmental justice is something that we're going to be talking about in this chapter, right? Power and access and historical patterns of oppression. None of this, the people who are drinking this water and the people who are drinking this water, happens in a vacuum. It happens because of historical patterns of oppression, and we will examine those and environmental justice in relation to power, access, race, gender, food deserts, all sorts of really interesting pieces this semester. Woo! I'm glad I don't need fast food anymore. Oh, look at that picture. I was so cute when I was little. No, that's not me. Anyway, what actions of yours clearly cost the environment? Why do we still do them? And what would it take to change those behaviors? I may have mentioned I sleep with a fan. It's electricity all night long. It doesn't make any sense to me. Some people have the lights on all day long or the TV when they're gone. You've got a roommate that does that. But really, what would it take to change those behaviors? Because I think that many of those behaviors are easily workable and easily changeable without sacrificing a ton. All right, question. What repercussions of climate change are you most concerned about? And moving ahead, look, there are a lot of approaches and views and disciplines that we can make sense of our ecological state that we're in right now, but we want real solutions, and most of them apply to more than just one problem. We'll find this semester that they are interconnected time and time again, every single chapter. So they share similar roots. It's not the result really of just one thing. All right, this is a good one. What is one thing that you would like to learn more about this semester in regards to sociology and the environment? All right. Everybody has something different and unique. And a lot of times people mention something in this list every semester that I've never heard of before. So that would be awesome. What's one thing that you would like to learn more about? And I am trying to design this class, not only what I've got ready to roll for the whole semester, which I already know, but what you might want to learn about that I don't even know about, that we can grasp the semester that is awesome and interesting and fun. What does sociology have to do with today's environmental problems? Everything. Okay. All right. It's the end of this chapter. Thank you very much, everybody, and be good people and do good things, and I'll see you later.